Today on our 2015 Chrysler Town and Country, we're going to take a look at and install the Derale Series 8000 plate fin transmission cooler kit. Here's what the transmission cooler looks like installed. We have the front fascia removed, that way you can see how it works and have a good idea of what it looks like. Now the reason you would want a transmission cooler is, say if you're pulling a heavy load regularly or pulling a trailer, the transmission cooler actually assists your transmission to keep it nice and cool, that way you don't overheat it and damage it. The way it does that is it runs in line with your factory transmission cooler, so you'd simply tap into it and direct the fluid into the new transmission cooler. It cools it by airflow going across the fins, and then it takes that cold fluid and directs it back into the transmission. So this particular cooler, it's a plate fin design. I really like it much better than the other tube fin designs because these are a lot more durable. You don't have to be as careful when you're installing it as the tube fin ones, which bend up really easy. It just feels better in your hand, and it will last a lot longer and stay in much better shape than the other design. To begin our install, we'll need to remove the front fascia, that way we have enough room to work. Up top there will be 4 fasteners. 2 of them will be 10mm bolts, the other 2 will be push pin fasteners. To remove the push pin, you can use a flathead or a trim panel removal tool, whatever you might have handy. Just lightly pry it up. Pop it out like that. Next we'll move on to our bolt. Take a 10mm. Now we'll do the other side the same way. Now we're going to remove 2 screws here in the wheel well. They'll be the exact same setup on each side. It does make it a little easier to turn your wheels in. That way you have more room to remove your screws. This is a Phillips head screw. Above our screws, there is a 10mm bolt kind of tucked way up here. We'll need to remove that as well. All right, we'll go ahead and do that to the other side. If your Town and Country is equipped with fog lights, you're going to want to disconnect those. You simply just pull out on each tab and pull down. And do that to each side. With all the fasteners removed, we can take off our front fascia. Now along the front body lines here, there are some clips, so you might have to kind of wiggle it and work it to get them unseated. That's not a bad idea to have a friend give you a hand removing it, because it can be a little awkward. And just set it to the side for now. We went ahead and found which line is a return line. That's the line that we're going to tap into. We did that by starting the engine and letting it get to operating temperature. And then with our fingers, we actually felt the temperature of each line. This lower line here was the cooler of the 2. It's going to be really easy to tell which one's hotter or colder. We're looking for the coolest line. So that was this one. That's a return line. So that's the one we're going to be working with. To remove this line, there's a little cover here. You can just push it out of the way with a flathead screwdriver or your fingers. And then there will be a clip, just like this, that actually clips into that groove there. And so you can use a flathead and a pair of needle nose. Just be really careful not to lose it when you pull it out. Once you have that out of the way, you can get a napkin or a rag, and using your fingers, can pull the line out. You might get a few drips, and just leave it like that for the time being. Now we can prepare our transmission cooler. So we can take off these protective end caps here. Just set those off to the side. Then using some silicone spray, you can go ahead and just slightly lubricate our ends here. Just be careful not to actually get any lubricant inside of the cooler. Take one end of our provided hose. Just work that over the fitting. We can take both of our hose clamps, put them over our hose, and then connect the other end to the other side. Once you have the hose all the way down where you like it, you can snug up both of your hose clamps, and then we're ready to go to the next step. Here's what the clamps look like installed. The barbs and hose are a really tight fit, so you just want to make sure you get the hose over the barb enough to allow your clamp to get a good grip like this. Now we're going to mock it up where we want our transmission cooler to sit. Remember, you want to have maximum airflow on it, so towards the center is always best. To help us mock it up, we use a Derale mounting kit. The Derale Universal Bendable Mount Kit makes it really easy because these mounts here you can bend and shape just about any way you want. And it comes with some hardware so we can screw it right in. And as you can see, it works pretty good for the Town and Country situation here. As I said earlier, the mounting kit does come with hardware. However, I just want to point out that we actually used 1/4-inch bolts and lock nuts on the back, but you can pick those up at your local hardware store if that's the way you want to go. And we're going to be replacing the sheet metal screws with actual self-tapping screws, but you can find those on eTrailer.com. Now with the cooler mocked up in its general location, we can work on our hoses. So what we're doing is we actually put the hoses through this opening here, and this one closer to the center makes a really good angle at this factory outlet. So we're going to cut it there and connect those two together. And then since this opening is at an angle, we're going to take the hose closer to it, run it through, kind of loop it around, and connect it back to there. I didn't mention earlier, but I want to now, whenever you're running your hoses, do whatever you can to avoid any kinks. You want free flow, and that's why we're going to loop it back around on this one. That way it's nice and free flowing. I use some cutters here. Cut one part of your hose. And we'll kind of loop this one around and get a better idea of where we need to cut it. So this is this hose length right here. Go ahead and get that cut. Now we can get them hooked up to our connections. To make life a little easier, to connect our other hose back to our factory cooler, we're going to be using a Derale snap-in adapter fitting. So we'll just go ahead and push that into the other new line of our new cooler. And when we get that fully in, we can go ahead and put a clamp on it. So this is what our adapter fitting and clamp looks like installed on our new line. So we can clip it back into our factory cooler here. But before we do that, the black cover that I mentioned earlier, be sure to take that off our factory line. Push it over. This might be kind of tricky because it's a little tight. All right, once we have it plugged in, make sure it's pushed in all the way, and then we can take our clip. Very carefully with some pliers, go ahead and push it into place. Make sure it seats all the way down. Then we can make sure we don't have any kinks in our line. Then give it a light pull just to make sure it doesn't come out. There will be a little bit of movement, but that's normal. As long as it stays in there, we're good to go. And we can go ahead and push our cover back over it all. All right, now we can connect our other line here. So first slide your hose clamp over it. And then we can use some silicone lubricant or transmission fluid on this fitting if needed, just to help push the line over it. Once you get a good ways over the barb, you can take your clamp and go ahead and get that tightened down. With all of our lines connected, now you can secure your transmission cooler. We went ahead and used our self-tapping screws to get it nice and tight, some zip ties just to clean everything up. We actually had about 6 or 7 inches of leftover transmission cooler hose. So what we did, we cut it long ways and zip tied it around this bracket here, and that'll just help eliminate any rattling or rubbing or anything like that, just for a little more peace of mind. Now with the engine running, you can go ahead and visually check to see if you see any leaks. If everything's dry, then we can go ahead and start putting everything back together. But it is a good idea to check your transmission fluid level, and if it's low, look in your owner's manual to see what type it uses, and then go ahead and add it till it's proper level. Now that we verified there's no leaks and everything is working properly, we can reinstall our front fascia the same way that we took it off. That'll complete our look at and install of the Derale Series 8000 plate fin transmission cooler kit on our 2015 Chrysler Town and Country.